All right, so it's very important to understand that the world is not growing larger, it's actually growing smaller, right? People are developing technology that allows us to influence one nation to influence another nation much, much faster, right? And this trend will continue, right? Technology will continue to advance until trade between the U.S. and the EU becomes much faster, etc. And so, understanding that uh, as destructive weapons become more and more powerful, letting nations like the EU uh, and their government be taken over, it is 100% foolishness. Okay, as we saw on October 7th, right? Islam is very, very goal towards destroying Western civilization. Ali Khamenei, Iran's leader, he would say, "Oh, it's fine if we die, as long as the West burns, the U.S. burns." Okay, and so you're right. Religion is not like a joke to most people, right? Most people take religion very seriously, and so when there is a group of individuals stating that their religion says you have to die, uh, that's bad, right? And you should take that into serious consideration. Now, the nations of the Middle East, right? So, is it a good idea for the EU to allow the UK's government, a nuclear power, to be overthrown so that they could potentially launch a nuclear strike on the EU? No, that's a terrible idea. Okay, is it a good idea for the EU or the US to lose even one single ally, to let one single ally be taken over or fall, such as Israel and the US right now? No, right? The more allies you have, the stronger you are, the greater your influence is, the greater your reach, etc. Right? And this goes on to about 1,000 factors more. Right? It's very, very important to have allies. It's very, very important to maintain the security of your allies and make sure that your allies are not conquered. Right? So let's say, perchance, right, Canada is allowing itself to be Islamified, right? They just passed laws saying that some verses in the Bible are hate speech, right? Let's begin banning Christianity, banning morality, so that we can crush our people down and bring them onto a point where we can control them. Should the U.S. permit this to happen? Should the U.S. Permit an ally to the north to slowly fall, and this is theoretical, right, over the next several hundred years to Islam, so that it becomes a threat to the U.S. and a war potentially develops from that, instead of protecting our allies and saying, hey, you guys have to step up and protect yourselves, or we will. Which is correct, right? And when a nation has nuclear weapons or is developing nuclear weapons, as we're seeing um, Iran was trying to develop nuclear weapons, which is correct, right? Same with most Islamic nations, right? Should the U.S., the West, permit a group of people who've sworn to destroy them to develop nuclear weapons? It may seem very simple, but it actually, there's a lot of people who seem to say, oh, the good idea is let's just be good and moral, right, and not intervene. It's not our business, etc. Well, letting someone who's sworn to destroy you develop nuclear weapons, that's 100% foolishness, right? And so uh, there is a conflict that will take place, right, and is taking place presently, right? We see terror attacks all throughout the EU nations, very, very prominent in the EU. And, they say, oh, it's not our fight. Well, your people are getting blown up. That makes it your fight. Uh, whether or not you want to make excuses so that you can stay out of it or not, right? Now, um, it doesn't mean that, right, due to the circumstances of the time, you will be able to, right? But it just means, what's the best course of action? Well, the best course of action is to keep your enemies who've sworn your destruction weak, or obliterate them completely, right? It's interesting with the Christian Islamic War, right? 1600 years, 2000 plus years. This war has been raging on, right? And so, what is the best course of action? Should someone have stopped it 1600 years ago, or, um, you know, let the death toll of that war progress? And so, when you see something that is not going to stop, itself, right, it eventually will have to be addressed. Understanding this is important because the world, right, is growing smaller and smaller. Nations that acquire nuclear weapons, right, it hasn't happened yet, but it is a certainty that it will come to pass, that another nuclear attack will take place. And so, gaining control of regions so that you are able to protect the USA or member states of the EU, any individual EU nation, the UK, etc., right? It's not going to be possible just saying, oh, we're just going to protect the USA. It's not possible, right? Other kings, other rulers are going to be out there. They're going to be looking for places to advance, right? And this, for example, China in the Panama Canal, right? So understanding that these world events, they're not isolated anymore, right? Due to the destructive nature of nuclear weapons, right? You cannot just sit hoping that the UK doesn't end up nuking anybody and let it be conquered, right? It's not an option. And so understanding that having at least a certain degree of rulership that extends over other nations as well is the correct thing to do, especially in regards to not permitting them to get nuclear weapons. A nuclear weapon, one of the largest nuclear weapons that we have, it expands 200 miles. Okay, nothing like that has been fired so far, and right, it could just be nations saying, oh, well, we have that, right? But understanding that that level of destruction needs to be very, very diligently watched over. And so when you're seeing nations like Iran, etc., suggesting, hey, let's get nukes, and other nations saying, oh, well, we'll just pretend we're isolated. Well, the world is not isolated, right? And thinking that, oh, we can just pretend it's an isolated scenario where Italy can just protect Italy and Italy will remain Italy. It's not correct, right? That's actually why the EU was developed, right? Together we can all protect each other. We'll be safe, right? Same with the USA. All the states joined together to take over the Western continent and protect it. And so understanding this is extremely important going forward, because what we're seeing from some nations in the world suggesting that, hey, maybe we should develop nukes, etc. It's not an option to let that come to pass, and preventing, right, the less nations that have nukes at this point is better. And so when it comes to global powers, USA, China, Russia, permitting other nations to get nukes, it's pretty much foolishness at this point. And so if other nations are suggesting they do that, or attempting to do that, right, it's a good idea to stop them. And from a nation's viewpoint, if you don't have nukes, it is also a very, very good idea to get them. And so understanding this, right, the world is not getting bigger, it's getting smaller, and these destructive forces, they're not going to get smaller, they're going to get larger, right, as we progress forward. It makes pretending to be isolated become less and less realistic, right? It makes letting other governments develop into a threat over your nation more and more foolish. Allowing allies to be paralyzed, etc., things like this, it's just 100% foolishness at this point in time. And these statements that I'm making will become increasingly factual over the course of time going forward.